This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's ChangeMaker is Mr. Robert Graham. Robert is the Executive Director of the Virgin Islands Housing Authority, where he manages about 3,000 affordable housing units throughout St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. Director Graham, thanks so much for joining me today.
I thank you for the opportunity.
I want to start with an island reference. I found it interesting that the local media has described you at being at the helm of a tightly run ship. I don't know if they intended the nautical pun, but will you start by taking us back to those first few days when you started at the Virgin Islands Housing Authority?
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate the question, and I'll take you back just a little bit further than that. In 2003, the Housing Authority was not able to submit its financial statements to HUD. That resulted in HUD declaring the Housing Authority as in trouble, and then HUD put in place a receiver that's in charge of all operations at that point. So from 2003 to 2008, there were at least 3 or 4 HUD receivers. And so what they did was a 2-step process to recover the Housing Authority, have the receiver recruit a permanent executive director to run the Housing Authority so that the receiver can then return to Washington and monitor the Housing Authority remotely and, of course, on site as well. So what they did was did an advertisement for an executive director. I applied for the position and was interviewed in Washington. HUD ultimately offered me the position, and at that point, our plan of action was to bring on board Board of Commissioners in an advisory capacity. For the next 4 years, we developed a plan of action, implemented a plan of action with a Board of Commissioners that was advisors. By 2012, we were able to then return control or give the advisory board the power for local control to make decisions. And so the advisory board turned to a regular board of commissioners with the fiduciary responsibility for the operations of the Housing Authority, and I reported to that board and not the receiver at that point. 2012, the board is in full control. We're implementing a revitalization of the Housing Authority's operations. And at that point, we began to become more efficient. I recruited individuals to be senior staff to implement some changes in the authority. So that takes us from 2012 to 2017. At that point in time, 2 Category 5 hurricanes decimated the territory. As a result, the damage from the hurricanes was approximately $12 billion damage. All of the utility lines were down. Nothing happened for a good 6 months. HUD and FEMA provided recovery funds. The Housing Authority, the Board of Commissioners wanted to have a recovery plan that took advantage of the funds that would be available to then develop a plan of action to deal with our inventory. At this point in time, I'm saying in 2017, 18, after the hurricanes, at that point in time, the inventory was 60 years old. They had dealt with probably a dozen hurricanes over that time period. And of course, the straw that broke the back was the Irma and Maria. 10% of the inventory, 300 units in one development, was completely decimated. We had to relocate 300 families in 2 or 3 months. What we did is develop a plan of action to replace half of it and rehab half of it. The total cost of that was $1 billion. So we expect to have 3 developers provide 300 units per year for each of the next 10 years.
Congratulations. That is an amazing distribution and fund leveraging and development that you guys are doing. I mean, that's a tall order for, being able to access developers and, all of those pieces. So great job for you guys. And I want to circle back to some of the other concepts you talked about. First, I have a question going back to the receivership piece of this, and I'm curious. At Quadell, we've done several receiverships across the country on behalf of HUD, but I wanted to get your take because as you were walking through the timeline of how you stepped in, how you prioritized, how you mapped out, reestablished local control and the board and all of those pieces, if you were going to say maybe what warnings or reminders for other executive directors, could you offer what they should be doing if they have to step into an agency and do some of what you had to do?
The one thing that the executive directors need to do more of, and we do it, there are at least three organizations, industry organizations. There is FADA, which is the Public Housing Executive Director Organization. There is CLAPA, which is large housing authorities. And then there's NARROW, which is all housing authorities. So in these industry groups, there is a wealth of information that is shared between the executive directors and the staff. So making those connections with other housing authorities, particularly a housing authority, say a 3,000 unit housing authority, there are probably 15 to 20 housing authorities that's in that category. So to develop from that organization, develop contacts of those executive directors in those organizations so that a housing authority that's teetering can compare itself to a housing authority that's well run of the same size. And a lot of executive directors, when they get past a certain point, they love to be able to share, to teach, and show individuals that are facing some challenges how they have faced those challenges, and then be able to do the same thing in their agency. So there's so many different ways for an executive director to get information about how to implement best practices and improve the operations and efficiency and vision of their agency.
Are you seeing development challenges that are maybe unique to your area, or are they kind of pretty much what the rest of the nation is experiencing? As you're going through all of this redevelopment effort and all of these new units you're describing, are you seeing any challenges with like building materials or supply issues that are impacting any of your redevelopment, or is it pretty much what the rest of the nation is going through?
Thanks for that question. And clearly, whatever the nation goes through, we go through it. And that old analogy: if the mainland gets a cold, we get pneumonia. And so it is more intense, the challenges that we have than the mainland. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. The Virgin Islands is 1,000 miles off the coast of Florida, so we already have to import everything almost that comes into the territory. So that the supply chain disruptions cause material costs to probably increase 25-30%. That's anywhere from cabinets to 2x4 plywood, all the building materials. The cost increased by 30%. And there are delays in the delivery. So the supply chain disruption significantly affected our ability to build the units. We were already the highest cost construction because of the need to import materials. So that just increased our cost to build. It doesn't deter us because we want to build quality housing. If you look at the 4 projects that we have done and the 2 projects that are under construction, we have a design imperative that we challenge our architectural firms to come away with a design that they will be proud of. We're building developments where we are doing a significant energy upgrade to them so that they are energy independent, but also battery backup for the solar, so that if a hurricane comes through, the development is not down. It has independent ability to provide power to those residents. And so that's increasing the cost of development, but it's well worth it because we are able to provide energy in a downturn for the territory.
You mentioned disaster recovery planning and utility conservation. And I understand that over a period of 10 years, you cut the housing authority's annual water bill in half. Why was the bill so high and how did you fix it?
Well, all housing, whether it's single-family housing or multifamily housing, there's a requirement to have a cistern. And for those that are not familiar with cisterns, it's basically in the mainland, if you have a basement, that is the area that is enclosed and that becomes the location for water that's harvested from rain from the roof to the basement where that basement is the cistern where you accumulate gallons of water. In my house, I have two 15,000 gallon cisterns. So I am independent of the utility company as it relates to water. For 3,000 units of public housing, or I should say for 25 developments, that may be a couple hundred buildings, we allowed the cisterns to go into disuse. So none of the developments were utilizing the cisterns to be able to provide potable water for the residents. So as a result, we had to utilize the utility company, and that water, it's higher cost than it would be for any utility company in the mainland. To give you an example, for 3,000 units of public housing, the operating budget is $25 million annually. At one point in time, around 2010, we were paying for water $10 million of the $25 million budget. $10 million for water of a $25 million annual budget. The utility company revenue was $40 million annually for water. We were providing 25% of the utility company's revenue for water. They in turn use half of that to subsidize the electric cost generation. So now we're down to, by replacing water lines, a particular development can have a cost to replace old cast iron water lines from $500 to $1 million to replace the water lines in a given development of, say, 150 unit development. The replacement for the water line could be $500,000 or $1 million. And you can see a reduction. So we were paying $10 million a year for water, and a great deal of it was going in the ground because the cast iron pipes were breaking. After the original cast iron pipes for 50 years, they naturally would break and the water go in the ground. The meter keeps running. We pay the bill.
And this also can speak to some of your sustainability efforts as you're replacing these, not only from years of wear and tear or maybe funding disinvestment at the federal level, but now you're able, as you're renovating them, to be able to go through some sustainability efforts. And I know that's been, a real priority for you guys on where you're located too. So have you been able to see lots of developers embrace this, or is this just kind of a thing that you have implemented? How have you blended those concepts?
It is a necessity for us to deal with the provision of utility in the new developments, but also address it in the older developments. So, and our developer partners have embraced it. And so we are leading the charge for, even if it's a rehab or new construction, we're ensuring that the provision of water and electricity is cost effective, and we're biting the bullet and funding it up front in order to have the efficiency over time. So it's a necessity that we do the investment.
That's great. Thank you for all that information. Okay, Director Graham, we have to take a break, but coming up in the second part of my conversation with Robert Graham, the Executive Director of the Virgin Islands Housing Authority, Director Graham shares some of the key takeaways from his meeting with the HUD Secretary, Marcia Fudge.
She wants to make sure that the money that is provided for recovery is utilized effectively, efficiently, and right away. That message was clear in every discussion that she had, is that you guys have to use this money.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.